eyes reluctantly away from the empty wilderness and scanned a single street of the village. It was deserted, but he knew it would be. It was a ghost town, typical of the gold rush boom. It had grown up overnight, enjoyed a brief existence, and overnight it had died. The buildings were dilapidated, though the wood showed no sign of rot. The lack of moisture in the atmosphere accounted for that. But there was no lack of moisture now, he thought grimly, not the way the sweat was pouring off him. He scanned the solitary street urgently, desperately searching for a secure hiding place amongst those frail, worn-out structures. A shuffling noise came from nearby in the desert. It brought Brown's head swinging round and his eyes straining to penetrate the deep shadows which receded back into the wilderness. The revolver felt heavy in his hand. He instinctively brought it up in the direction from which danger threatened, but he realized that the security it provided was an illusion. Another sound, this time a soft snort, and he saw it, a huge black shape lumbering towards him. He left the wall against which he'd been resting and dashed into the empty street. Desperately, he sought somewhere to hide, somewhere strong enough to keep out the thing, for so he called it, should it find him. What it was, he didn't know. An alien creature from outer space, perhaps, or maybe an earthly scientific experiment in genetics gone wrong. He could outrun it, but it couldn't outlast it. If he didn't find somewhere safe here in the village, then he was doomed, for he knew that in the open desert it would wear him down, and when he dropped, it would kill him. As for the gun, it was about as much use as a pea shooter against a tank. When the thing had burst into their camp, they poured bullets into it, all to no avail, save perhaps to make it angrier. It had killed his 4 companions, breaking them like bitter twigs, or ripping them apart with its cruel claws. Running up the street, he briefly examined the buildings on both sides, instantly rejecting each one. Then he saw the sheriff's office, its sign hanging by a single chain. It was a stone building. Probably it would have cells, and cells meant steel bars, and steel bars meant security. At least he hoped so. He dashed for it, glancing back down the street to see if the thing was following him. It was, but he could just make out the dark figure menacingly advancing. Then he tripped, cracked his shin on the step up to the sidewalk as he measured his length on it. The gun flew out of his hand, and he heard it hit the stone wall. He cussed and used up a few precious seconds looking for it, but to no avail. Another glance revealed the thing closer now. He realized that concealment was out of the question. His only hope lay in the strength of the sense. Scrambling up, he limped towards the door, and once through, he swung it shut and raced for the sole cell, reached it, and closed the door. The lock gave a satisfying click. Moonlight slanted in through the small barred window, and Brown retreated to the darkest corner of the cell, where he tried to squeeze himself into the wall. Seconds which seemed like eons crawled past. Then he heard it, heavy steps dragging across the wooden sidewalk. It crashed against the flimsy door, which burst open. The thing stopped for a moment, sniffing. Then it located him and came on. Brown flattened himself even tighter against the wall. The bars stopped it. For some moments, it seemed puzzled by them. Then it closed its massive paws around them and shook. The whole place trembled and groaned, but the bars held. Brown prayed as he'd never prayed before. A moment's respite, and then the creature started again, and the whole place shook even worse than before. Brown closed his eyes. Couldn't bear to look. The thing was angry. It made low, growling noises. The vibration was tremendous, and he felt that the old building just might collapse. But it didn't. And miracle of miracles, the bars held. How long the shaking lasted, he didn't know. It seemed like an eternity. But finally, it slackened as the beast tired. And then it was gone. His nerves were taut, but gradually, through sheer exhaustion, he fell asleep. To awaken next morning to the sun shining warmly through the small, barred windows. He was hungry and thirsty. He made to leave, but the door was locked. Only last night, he'd been so grateful grateful for that. But he had escaped the thing, only to find he couldn't get out. For hours he tried unsuccessfully. What last night had been his sanctuary was now his prison and his tomb.